Hey, what's up, everyone? You're currently tuned into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and netnetradio.com out of Tijuana. Today, Lietoc and I are joined by Chicago guitarist Daniel Wyche. How do you pronounce your last name, by the way?
Wyche, but you got really close, so congratulations. Okay. That was awesome.
Sick.
Wyche is what gets that gets a pass, you know?
Yeah.
So if you get the vowels right and the CH is close enough, then, excellent. Thank you.
What's the like worst pronunciation you've gotten on your last name?
Well, my siblings and I actually have a list. So we get, classics like Wyche, Wyche, but then you get like new letters thrown in there, like winch, classic. I have a friend who's Finnish, and he said that in Finnish it would be pronounced like Wuka or something like that, which I think is cool.
That's honestly kind of sick. So, yeah.
Once it gets into be like winch or I got Wyche one time, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. Cool. You're like, that's fancy. Sick.
You had to do some work to get to that one. So I respect that.
That's funny, dude. Well, we got Daniel Wyche here. Anyways, Daniel, what have you been up to in like the last year? How have you been keeping busy? I guess it's 2 years now. Actually.
God, yeah. Well, so you guys were talking about how you have been in the same place. I've actually moved around a lot in the last 2 years. So like, where should I start? Like pandemic or?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to start before, I guess like mostly during like pandemic or I guess.
Yeah. So like I was living in Chicago when the pandemic started. I was finishing graduate school and involved with a bunch of different arts organizations in Chicago, Elastic Arts especially, and the Experimental Sound Studio. And then when the pandemic hit, I was actually supposed to go on tour for the reissue tapes that Maddie, you had just referenced, Last Flight of the Void Ship Remainder, which I self-released, but actually Jordan Reyes helped me out with that a bit, like, because he's a saint. And, so I was supposed to go on tour, and that tour, start getting the emails. I think we're going to cancel. And that was that. So at the time I was living at this place called the Shape Shop, which is a recording studio. They've been around for a long time in Chicago. It was founded by a guy called Griffin Rodriguez, who's awesome, and was taken over by a friend of mine, Nick Brosty. Just gotta give everybody all the credit they deserve. So long story short, like my tour fell apart and I was living at a recording studio. So I was like, I should just figure out how to do shows on the internet from my house, not knowing anything about live streaming or anything like that. And I was kind of like brainstorming with people, and then some really amazing folks from this other organization called the Experimental Sound Studio, ESS in Chicago, were like, hey, we're thinking about doing a streaming series. You want to help? And so I helped co-found with Experimental Sound Studio and a friend, Ben Billington, who is also a bandmate and plays as Quick Sales and was in Oh No and a bunch of other great bands. And we co-founded this thing called the Quarantine Concerts. And so for most of the beginning of the pandemic, that took up almost all of my time. That and finishing graduate school, which I did, thankfully. So we were running this online streaming series, and we were doing stuff pretty much every night of the week for months. And the series is still going on. It was all for like, raising money for artists and stuff. We raised, I think, over $100,000.
Wow, that is crazy.
That all went right to artists. So that was awesome. And ESS people are like total heroes. They're all the best at what they do. So that was just like a real honor to be part of that and like help curate that and get that going. And then I got a job at the end, weirdly enough, through some bizarre miracle. I got a job as a professor. I have a PhD in religious studies, and I got a job somehow. I mean, I thought like all hope was lost on that front. It was just
wow, yeah,
really, really lucky. In a small town in Michigan, which I won't mention my employer just for professional reasons, but I moved to kind of small town Michigan right in the middle of the pandemic with my partner and our dog. And so it's about 3 hours or so from Chicago. So we've kind of been going back and forth. Small town life, walking our dog in the woods pretty much, since can't really hang out with people.
Yeah.
There aren't that many people to hang out with. So we're just spending a lot of time outside, and then we go back to Chicago for longer stretches. And, took a couple of trips to the East Coast to see my family. And, just kind of working on teaching. And that's a big challenge. It was really hard to be teaching 3 courses a semester online. And now I'm teaching in person again with masks and vaccines. And while everybody's mostly vaccinated at the college and they are required to wear masks, it's so hard. It's so stressful. All my students are struggling, everybody's just, things are just not back to normal, like on any level, even though we're all acting like they are. So that's been a major challenge. So like, it's so weird because actually I feel like I've had a lot of changes happen over the course of the pandemic. We started out in one place, living in one place, started this series, was doing a lot with that. It was really active, then kind of transitioned into this job or just teaching all the time, writing and sort of switching back and forth between the academic world and the music world and stuff, and like trying to make that happen. And then the other things that I had finished this record called Earthwork, like I actually finished it in 2019 and I was having a bit of a hard time finding a place to release it. And I was considering self-releasing, and like Jordan, who's been a friend for a long time from the Chicago scene, who runs American Dreams, I kind of didn't want to ask him because he's so busy and people are always kind of asking him for stuff. I don't want to be that kind of friend. But one day we were at the dog park and I was like, I should just send this to Jordan, see what he says. And he was like, yeah, this is great. Let's do it. So
that's sick.
So then I was really thankful because I had been working on that record for a long time. And I was like, I just need this to be out there somehow. And so we finally got that together and the record came out, finally just a few months ago. So it's just been like this crazy wash of different stuff, over the course of the last 2 years. Like so much has changed. Right. We moved also, we had a really, just this weird life stuff, like we had a really bad situation with our neighbors in the town we were living in Michigan. And we just one day we were like, we have to leave this place. We have to move. And so for whatever miracle, I have a very nice landlord who was like, well, I have this other house for rent. Do you want it? And we were like, yeah. So like, we're like working, worried about stuff, trying to keep involved in music somehow. And then just like, we have to move like a whole house in like one day, just like these crazy eruptions of crap to deal with and stuff. So, I've been trying to stay sane and everything. So now, so that's been like, and right now, I'm from New Jersey originally. So we drove out here from Michigan the other day and I'm getting married this weekend. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Congrats. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks. It's like just so much. And it was one of these things where like, you know what? Let's just do this, let's just do it next time. Let's do it. So it's been a lot. It's been crazy 2 years, I think, for everybody, obviously. But everybody's particular version of how it's been crazy has been so different. And that both sucks and is really interesting,
I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're able to stay like productive and like safe and all that. And like you found a job, like that's like a pretty big deal. Like we were talking about earlier, like, I don't know, just congrats on like being able to stay productive. Cause now I feel like not very many people can say that they were, or they were able to. So
I appreciate that. I think honestly, especially at the beginning, the quarantine concerts thing really, I think it saved a lot of our not, if not our lives, our sanity, because we all had like a thing to do to really focus on. We had a lot of people reach out to us and say like, thanks for doing this series, because it's given me something to do every night and stuff. And that was huge. That just like made us all feel extremely good to have like provided something for people who were just feeling, everybody felt so isolated, and it was nice for people to come together, like even if it's in the chat or whatever. It was definitely. It was a big deal.
I still get the notifications for the ESS quarantine concerts, but I always thought they were a great time. Every time I've attended one or whatever, I
love Claire's.
Yeah.
Oh God, fucking that show was the first one that Claire did with, I think it was the Azure showcase that also had Dillaway and the Chickens, and because that was a legendary night. That was amazing. We made a T-shirt of the Dillaway Chickens too, so I don't know if they're anymore on the ESS website, but
oh, dude, that's sick.
Yeah, it was great.
Wow. So I guess like you mentioned, you're doing writing and you're a professor and you have a PhD and stuff. Your book that you just got published, I guess, is called The Care of the Self and the Care of the Other. Can you tell us more about your book and your writing?
Yeah, I guess so. So it isn't published yet. I just got a book contract.
So, I see. Okay. That's what
it is mostly written, but I need to do revisions and stuff right now. So that was a really nice thing to round out this year, because I'm working on that. Obviously, it's based on my dissertation, and something I worked on for a long time. And I had some setbacks in grad school. I have a sleep disorder, and it took me a long time to get that diagnosed, and it really slowed everything down for a long time before I could start dealing with that. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough to, I don't see elevator speech. Basically, the book is about a set of thinkers from the 20th century, a few different philosophers and activists and things like that. So the two of the most famous are Michel Foucault, and Martin Luther King Jr. figures in to the book as well. There's a chapter on King. Two other chapters. One is on a French classicist called Pierre Hadot, who I really like, and then a guy called George Friedman, who is less well known in the English speaking world, but he founded the sociology of labor in France. And I'm adding a chapter on Audre Lorde. And so this seems like a big hodgepodge, but all of these people are people who at a certain point in the 20th century were interested in this idea of what people call the care of the self, or spiritual exercises, or something like that. I do avoid using the term self-care because it has all these other connotations. And I think part of what I'm trying to do is parse out what's different here, what makes some of these things really substantial, important, both sort of personally and politically for people, sort of ethically and politically, and also what makes some of them sort of contentless, I guess. Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things where it's like, well, who are you to judge, kind of thing. And I think that's right. But there are different criteria and different ways of studying these things. I'm not exactly passing judgment on anything, but it's kind of an intellectual history, kind of a genealogy, just thinking like, what do each of these thinkers have to say about this idea of specifically doing practices or exercises of some kind to change yourself in some way, to become better by whatever criteria you might define that, become different, become, a sort of more whole version of yourself, or a new version of yourself, to undergo some kind of self change. And they offer really different ideas about all this. And so for somebody like Audre Lorde, there's this famous line that gets quoted a lot about caring for myself as a form of political warfare. And this is from this book, Burst of Light, and, contextualizing that and thinking, oh, it's not just this kind of bumper sticker slogan. Like, what is she talking about? What does it mean for her, given who she is, to be fighting cancer, which is specifically what that she's referring to in that case, being a Black woman, a lesbian living in, the 1980s, 70s, and so on, to care for herself in a certain way is, in fact, if you contextualize her circumstances, it has a certain political valence and things like that. Or you have somebody like Martin Luther King, who, in Letter from Birmingham Jail, which is like a very, very popular, very well, widely read piece, he talks about these different aspects of direct action. And one of them, he says, is engaging in a practice of self-purification. And he doesn't really elaborate on that. And so, like, what is he talking about there? And when he says that, he's actually invoking a long history, like a tradition in nonviolence that kind of goes back through a few figures to Gandhi and some others. And Gandhi is a complicated and problematic figure himself in many ways, but just kind of isolating this concept, like, what does a political form of self-purification look like, right? And so that's not just anything. It's very, very specifically tied to what's the situation that people are in? What are the goals that they're trying to reach? What is the self that's being purified? What needs to be purified? What's impure or something here? Or what's the problem, right? That this particular thing is supposed to address. So that's kind of what the book is about in a nutshell, kind of asking, like, what do these people mean when they talk about this stuff? And what are the political consequences of it, if anything? And I think, because it can sound to some people like, well, that's not that important, right? That's not really political activism or something like that, but try to argue that some of these practices of the self have an important role for certain people within certain contexts, within certain political struggles and things like that. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but
I thought that was a great answer.
Okay, cool. I have no idea sometimes.
So who was the French person you were talking about too in the very beginning?
There's two other French figures. One is Pierre Hadot. It's his name is spelled Hadot.
Okay.
He was an important kind of French philosopher and philologist who wrote about ancient Greek and Roman philosophy mostly, but also to some extent about Christianity. He makes this argument about like what was philosophy really about in the ancient world. And it's not just, he says it's a practice. It's mostly concerned with forms of life, ways of living, spiritual exercises, caring for yourself. And he's not just saying this in a kind of throwaway way. It's based on like a real deep reading of what is going on in these books. He reads like the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius and says, look, if you look at this book specifically through the lens of what we think philosophy is supposed to be right now, it's actually pretty incoherent. But if you look at it as him kind of working on himself, trying to figure things out, trying to like become better in some way, then it makes perfect sense. Like the genre makes sense, And the other person was a guy called George Friedman, who was somebody I kind of just discovered through Hadot and some others. But he, again, influential person in France. He had been an early Marxist sociologist. He, was in World War II, but he had done really early sociological visits to the Soviet Union and studied working conditions there, and was very, sympathetic to the Soviet project. And then, I think like a lot of people in the early, that era during the Stalin era, especially people who were there. I mean, he was there in the 1930s during the Stalin show trials and stuff, and was like, whoa, we got to pump the brakes on a few things here, still a believer, in this project, but like, here's some mild criticisms, and then he gets in big trouble, right, for these criticisms of the USSR and so on. But he never, he never really stops being a Marxist or anything like that. But he kind of shifts to thinking about mostly about automation and mechanization of labor and the way that people interact with machines. It's crazy because he does all these visits to factories and stuff over the course of the 20th century. And you read this stuff and you're like, this could be an Amazon plant or something.
Yeah.
He talks about lighting, ventilation, stuff like that. Like the way that work, like, can really tear people's souls apart.
Yeah.
So he has this phrase, like it translates to soul removal. He's like literally talking about how this stuff is soul sucking,
Yeah. Wow.
And how it can be not soul sucking, how it can be affirming and great, but just not under these conditions,
So I guess like, do you want to talk a little bit more about like, just your academic work as well and stuff too?
Sure. I mean, like anything specific, I guess, on that, or?
I was not a religious studies major, but I took a couple classes in the UCSB department, and I often came at it from a perspective that was tearing up the classics, let's say, and almost getting kind of a bit of an insight into the fact that the religious studies it's not in flux per se, but I'm curious about like at least what, if you were going to religious studies conferences, what were you seeing that was like really shocking you? What was kind of some of the more progressive or forward thinking stuff there?
So I would say like, that's cool. You went to US, like Santa Barbara, because that's like one of the best religious studies departments.
Wow. Really? That's kind of crazy.
It is. Yeah. I really like a lot of the people there. Have you met with Rudy Busto? Oh, I know Rudy Busto. Yeah.
That's sick. My God. Because he's the professor that really set off a lot of shit for me. Yeah. He, so years ago, when I first went to graduate school, I got into two programs, University of Chicago and Santa Barbara. And Rudy Busto called my house to try and convince me to come. And I, look, it just came down to money. And also the person I really, really wanted to work with was at Chicago. So I went there, but I have so much, admiration for the Santa Barbara department. But he ended up talking to my stepdad on the phone, because he just called the house phone.
Yeah.
And my stepdad is, he's a really great guy. He's, he's a guy who wears a lot of camouflage. He likes duck hunting. So the fact that this really great and very preeminent religious studies scholar was talking to my stepdad, who's a really great and preeminent man of the woods, let's say, was like amazing to me. And apparently they chatted for a while. I was like, this is fucking great, but yeah, there's other people there I love. So I remember I was in San Diego actually in 2013. I gave a paper on Mormonism and religion and Ender's Game. It's like sci-fi, my favorites, Orson Scott Card, and who is a terrible person. Orson Scott Card is an absolute morally repugnant.
But book-wise, it's a really good book.
So
that was
good.
a book that meant a lot to me in 8th grade.
I know, right? So good. And I think Rudy Busto runs that panel at our national conference, the religion and science fiction stuff. So he asks some really killer questions.
That's the class I took.
Oh, no way.
Him.
Okay.
So wow. A lot of...
What year was that?
So I took it literally right before the pandemic in 2019.
Okay.
And that class was a huge... I mean, the Asian American Studies department at UCSB, I think, is bar none like some of the strongest scholar base, because what they were giving a lot of us was a new way of looking at liberal arts culture. And what Rudy Busto gave was, to me, just a great vocabulary, and especially emphasizing the novum and that aspect. And so, like, I was looking at that from a perspective of someone that was really getting into experimental music at the time, and so when I found a tape like this, a lot of shit clicked for me.
Oh, it's all connected. Yeah. All of that. I mean, the fact that you're even talking about specifically Rudy Busto, there's a total connection there, I mean, with that. Yeah. So, great. Wait, so what was the question?
It's just, so what I guess have you been seeing, though, kind of progressively going on at these conferences? And I guess that could go into that tangent about Rudy Busto in this paper.
I mean, like progressively in terms of politics, or just sort of like that kind of thing, or
in terms of, just what is coming up, where the topics are going, where the thought is headed.
It's going a lot of places. I mean, it's hard to stay with a field like religious studies, because it's actually very diverse field in terms of what it deals with, right? So you have everything. I'm not a theologian or anything like that. My training is in philosophy of religion and in like American religions and stuff. So I'm kind of like I'm a dilettante, frankly, but so I do historical stuff, but I do kind of philosophy and ethics too. So you have people who are doing things that, frankly, I don't really understand. Like a lot of the real sort of deep theology stuff. It's kind of like, this is fascinating to me historically, in terms of what the people doing it are getting out of it and what I would get out of it are very different, but I've seen, and again, we have everything. Study of Islam, we have study like spirituality studies, which is something I'm interested in. We have like all this Christian stuff. We have, Jewish studies, and like all these things are kind of mixed in there, and so on. So it's actually kind of like hard to trace, but it's interesting because there's so many neat things going on in the field. I think one thing that I've noticed, at least among my students, which is something I find really reassuring, is that even though, the United States is a very religiously diverse place, and yet you still get there's a dominant culture that's tied to a kind of dominant kind of religiosity. So mostly evangelical Protestantism is something that like you see everywhere. It's sort of politically really influential. It's, it even sets the terms that we think in about a lot of things. And so even though I have a lot of students who, that may be the background that they're coming from, they're actually really excited to learn about other traditions. So on the teaching level, that's the thing that I find the most exciting. Like we'll read stuff from the Quran in a class, or we'll read, early Christian stuff, which is way weird, some really cool stuff on, there, or Buddhist studies or whatever it is. And students to be very eager to actually just learn about other cultures and other religions and other ways of framing the world and things like that. Because I think, people, I don't know, you hear about how everybody's very siloed and very like, no, I'm part of this group and, whatever. And I don't know. I don't see that in my students. I think some of them, maybe they don't want to learn about things that are new and different, but most of them really do. They're like, this is cool. This is something that's so different from my own experience. And that draws me to it rather than pushes me away from it. That teaching wise, I think that's the most exciting thing. Just seeing people who are really young, be psyched to learn about other people, that I think is like the most important thing. Academically, like I've kind of lately fallen into, again, I'm part of my training is in like early Christianity, but I've sort of fallen into hanging out with some of those people lately. And there's really interesting stuff in, especially early Christian studies around like gender and sexuality that's been going on for a while, but I think is finding a really interesting place right now. I have a really great colleague at Rice called Nikki Katsumi Clements, and she is amazing. Sorry, Kasumi, not, don't want to add extra letters to people's names when I was just complaining about that. But Nikki Clements, who's amazing and is doing work on, sexuality and things like that, and early Christianity and stuff like that. There's also fantastic kind of new work in Buddhism and things like that. There was a really great professor at Chicago called Steve Collins, who passed away a few years ago suddenly, which was terrible. And he was awesome because he also loved Ornette Coleman, and he's like one of these great Buddhist studies scholars. And he was like, told us about going into a record store. He was English in London or something when he was a kid, and just being like, I saw this album called The Shape of Jazz to Come. And I thought, what could that be? And then changed his life, but he has a new book called Wisdom as a Way of Life that's on Theravada Buddhism and sort of philosophy and things like that. And his books are great. And that's tied directly to my own research, and kind of thinking about those things. A lot of cool stuff is going on in Buddhist studies, especially in people who are really taking South Asian traditions as intellectually seriously as they do Western philosophy, and sort of working on those things in that way and saying what are the questions people are asking? How are they asking them? How are the answers? And something. So I think it's important to understand this stuff historically, but I find it exciting to be let's take it as seriously as the people who are doing it take it, not as this novelty. You know what I mean? So there's so many things. It's a really cool. There's cool research in Islam right now too. Just people talking about things like Islam and gender, Islam, and there's a great guy I really like to follow on Twitter, Ali Alomi, who does these threads on the jinn in Islam and these spiritual beings that are not angels and not humans, and what's their role in the sort of Islamic cosmology, and then things like Islamic astrology and stuff. And so I don't know, I see all these cool cross-cultural and cross-religious kind of conversations going on, and I find that exciting at a scholarly level in the same ways I do at a teaching level, because it's just cool when people share their cool backgrounds with each other and interests. It's just a net good always. I don't know, does that answer the question? Is that
absolutely?
Yeah, that was cool.
It's just good. I don't know. I mean, this show is freeform enough to cover religion and just give all a bunch of recommendations. So this is lovely.
Sweet. Yeah. All these people are great. Yeah. And I will say Nikki Clements' book on John Cassian, who was this early Christian monk who traveled around the desert and interviewed the other monks and was like, what do you guys do here? Her book is amazing. Those sources are amazing. It's super cool. So
that's pretty sick. I know this is kind of random, but do you ever come across any indigenous religious studies or anything like that? I don't really know.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
totally. No, it's so cool. I'm not a big specialist in that. So because I'm not, I don't want to try and represent that field too much. You know what I mean? I'd be careful about, again, representing other people's stuff, whether it's their culture and their traditions or so on. But there is really exciting work in religious studies, and I think in other fields as well right now, just on indigenous traditions and indigenous religiosity. And one of the problems that we have in thinking about religion, which is that we use this word a lot. It's really hard to define. And historically, the concept of religion itself, you can, if you try and define it, I can probably come up with a specific thing that you would also recognize clearly as a religious tradition that then causes problems for your definition. And that's partially because the very idea of religion, especially in the US, is so Christian centric. It's built into what we think of. And that's interesting in that that concept itself historically comes about in a lot of time, in certain cases. I mean, sort of especially with somebody like Columbus, right? In defining what it is that Europeans do, right? That these indigenous people don't do. And so it's a kind of negative definition. We have religion, therefore they do not, or something. And that's a way that this concept and this term actually really takes on a life of its own at a certain point in history. There's a classic essay on this called Religions Religious by a guy called J.Z. Smith, who was a really important religious studies scholar, died a few years ago also. He, by all accounts, was a wizard of some kind. If you see a picture of him, he looks like Gandalf or something.
That's sick.
But so all that is to say, like, there's really great stuff in like indigenous religions, and how does the way that indigenous people historically and currently practice what we would call religion, how does that kind of expand or, challenge what we think of as religion in the first place? What is that? And I think it's also just important to give space for people to learn about indigenous traditions and other traditions from the perspective of the people who are actually practicing them, because so much of what we have is just these caricatures, they're even well-meaning ones, through like a white or European lens or something like that.
For
right.
Sure.
There was I don't know if you saw this, but there was like a video recently, and it was like a white school teacher, like doing some kind of native.
Yeah, I saw that. That was rough.
And there was like indigenous students in the class, and they filmed it, and they're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was rough.
So, yeah, I was talking to my students about the show Reservation Dogs. Have you saw that?
Yeah, I've heard a couple people recommend it.
Yeah, and it's one of the first shows with an all indigenous writers' room and everything. And I honestly, I can't judge. I'm not an indigenous person. I don't know the traditions and stuff, but I was really interested in how much of the spiritual and religious beliefs are represented, like at least of the communities that were represented in the show. I haven't read enough on how well that's been done, but it was cool to see it, at least knowing that the people writing these scenes are indigenous people themselves. So they're represented in a certain way. And then my students were very interested in talking about the show this year. And I know there were some criticisms of it from various perspectives, but it just raised a lot of cool things to talk about and to think about in terms of also just like, how do different kinds of people, interact with what they take to be, the other world or invisible parts of this world or whatever that might be, just thinking about that in new ways that aren't, again, for us, like not sort of basically just Christian ways of doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. That's really interesting. I know I was like, I'm like studying, I guess, or I took like an archaeology class this like last year. I kind of like was doing research for GIS and like archaeology related things. So it kind of like sparked an interest. Like I was like, wow, like maybe I should have gone into like the anthro realm of things at some point. But just like reading like creation stories and stuff like that and just thinking about like indigenous religion is like so sick. And it sometimes like has like brought me to tears because I'm just like, this is like so freaking beautiful and just so like not what we like traditionally think of as like something, and these people have been practicing it for like longer than Christianity and stuff,
Were there specific like creation stories that you had read or myths or whatever?
One that I thought was like really cool was like, this is like Chumash land where like we are in like, Santa Barbara and stuff. One of my favorites was like, I guess their like perception of like heaven or something like that, but like not like heaven. I don't know. I say that because I'm like Christianity,
analog that, whatever it might be. Right?
Yeah. And so it's like a journey, and their soul like moves up to like this point in like Santa Barbara. There's like this, like, I forget the name of the point, like Point Conception or something like that. And their soul gets there and it has to go through like a series of trials to actually make it to like the very end, and
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's like really sick. And they have to like, if their soul is good, it will make it past all of the trials, like even though the trials will be like painful and all this stuff. But once you get there, you'll never be hungry. You'll never be thirsty. You'll have everything provided for you in this certain space with like all the other people, like good people that are there. And I guess like the people that don't make it, they usually like their spirits will like die in like the trials or something. Or there's like one specific story that I was reading in like the book where it was talking about, I think it was like Coyote, but like Coyote had cheated his way to the very end.
Coyote,
and made it there.
Classic Coyote.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because Coyote is always just like the trickster and like
the trickster. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And Coyote like made it down to like the very end, but like cheated the trials and stuff. And because like he cheated the trials, he never actually fully made it. So he was just eternally thirsty and starving the entire time, kind of just stuck in this purgatory where everybody was there that he knew and all this stuff. I think like his wife died or something like that. And he wanted to like follow his wife or something, but he cheated it. So like, he didn't actually die yet and he made it there, but it's like nobody could see him. Like he couldn't interact with anybody. He couldn't drink any of the water, it was like, but it was just like kind of like describing like what their end of life like journey is,
That's super cool. Yeah, I would love to read that if you have,
I'll shoot it to you. I'll shoot you this other video too. And it's really cool. I'll shoot you this one really interesting one. Their creation story is really good too. So the Channel Islands are off the coast of here, and it's said that like, the Chumash kind of like started there. They found like, some of the oldest human remains on the Channel Islands and stuff like that.
It's so cool.
It's super cool. And like for our project, we had this woman named Julie Tumamai, and she's like one of like the most prominent like members of like the Ventadeno and like Babadenyo Chumash. Her like her family descends from the Channel Islands, actually, like from Santa Cruz, I believe. And anyway, she has this really cool story, or like she tells the story of like, I believe it's Hitash, which is like the, creator of like the earth and stuff like that, and kind of just talks about how like she made like a rainbow bridge to like bring people from the islands to populate the rest of the world and stuff like that. And the people that fell off with like the rainbow bridge became like the dolphins, and those are like their other brothers and sisters and stuff. And like, yeah, it's like, it's so sick, dude. It's so freaking cool. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some, and anything, so like my wife does work on like animal ethics basically. And so we're always really interested in like any stories about the way people relate to animals and stuff, especially in myth and stuff. It's always so good. There are ways of thinking about how we relate to the rest of the world and to animals and to each other that are radically different from our own, and the ones that we are kind of raised with, usually, at least, the sort of average person in a given time and place. And I think just the experience of learning these like other possible ways of thinking is itself, like, even if they aren't things that you want to do, or maybe they aren't good ideas even, you know what I mean? Or something you feel like maybe I can't go that way. Just having the option to learn about it, I think, is itself really, really important.
I think it's really important too. Yeah. And I think it's also like pretty like important that society is kind of like opening up to like these like different, like, looking at it from like the perspective of like an indigenous person, as opposed to like what the Spanish wrote in their journals and stuff like that. Cause we were taught everything from the mission perspective. And I remember like reading some books, recently about like what actually happened at the missions and stuff like that. And like, telling like my mom and stuff about like what I read, and just like how like devastating like the real history actually is and stuff. My mom's like, wow, I thought the missions like helped people, and just the fact that, dude. And like, that's just like what everybody is taught. And my mom was like, I thought they had a great time. I thought they like saved them. And I'm just like, no, they didn't need saving.
Save them from what? Yeah,
exactly.
No disrespect to your mom, because that's
it's just like, what they're taught. You know what I'm saying?
Not
it's
a weird thing. A lot of people think that.
Yeah.
One of the things I end up doing a lot with is just like colonial New England and sort of like, sort of talking about King Philip's War and just native interactions with, settlers and things like that in the 1600s in Massachusetts, and even in Rhode Island, and, and stuff, or Canada actually too. And it's just, everybody is like, the students really have a very, very simple, simplistic understanding of, because, it was Thanksgiving, and we were talking the other day, and I was like, the Puritans and the Pilgrims are the same people. Like, I think a lot of people, you don't learn that. Like, oh, the Pilgrims, these people were pure, like, it's just weird how these very simple points get left out. Just like the education people get. It's tough. It's
a very tough thing to like but like I said, I think it's great that society is like opening up to like view it from like other perspectives. Cause like, I feel like once you like learn that stuff, it's just like, I don't know, it's just like really great and like eye opening and stuff. I don't know. I think the world would be a better place once they start actually, like, people are taught like the truth about that stuff,
Hope so. Yeah. I mean, I hope we all make it to learn the truth.
Seriously. Anyways, that was really cool. I really enjoyed talking to you about that. That was sick.
I love talking about that.
So I guess we'll jump into a little bit of music stuff. So could you like shine a light on like your formative music moments and like your inspiration? You're currently Michigan based, but you're from Chicago before. Can you tell us about like the Chicago music scene as a whole, and like how you got involved and everything?
Yeah. So I'm originally from New Jersey.
Or New Jersey, sorry.
I went to college at Rutgers. I was in New Brunswick, New Jersey for a long time, which was, I think my music history is pretty eclectic. I grew up a lot on classic rock with my parents. I'm 41, so I was born in 1980. So my parents, were around the 60s and 70s and had honestly really good taste in music and still do. And so I grew up with their records and, got really into playing guitar and really inspired by people like Jimi Hendrix, who, at the end of the day is, I think, one of the most radical artists the United States has ever produced. Mm-hmm. And I think that like his sort of place as this like classic rock icon or whatever can obscure how fucking radical he was and experimental and weird. And I think that really drew me to like the feedback, all the kind of weird extended techniques and so on. If you ask, I mean, many of my favorite guitarists will start here. Like I just listened to a great interview with Jessica Ackerley, who is somebody I love and admire enormously. One of my favorite people playing guitar right now. And she was like Jimi Hendrix, or Andrew Klinkman, who's another great Chicago guitarist who's in the band Spirits Having Fun. Same thing. Hendrix, all these people who are super radical. I mean, they will point to him. So, I grew up on that stuff, which like a lot of people my age and in my, world, I guess. But I think I always was drawn to the weird parts of it. And I think actually a lot of classic rock is super bizarre, and all the psychedelic stuff, I think it almost gets cliched, but then when you kind of reapproach it with fresh eyes, there is some incredible stuff going on, beyond the radio kind of play. And I loved all that stuff, but I also encountered like punk and hardcore in high school, and New Jersey is still strong hardcore scene. I'm actually currently sitting at Asbury Park, New Jersey, which is one of the most famous towns for music, I guess. It's where, Bruce Springsteen was from and so on. But I mean, throughout my life and to this day, there's a strong punk and hardcore scene here. It's still kind of the major thing people do in this area. I'm not as up on it now, but from like 1996 to 2005, I knew everything about all that stuff, And,
so were you participating in then what could have been kind of referred to as that like third wave emo?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah, I was.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to shows. I'm at my cousin's house, and we were all together in a band in New Brunswick in the late 90s, early 2000s called Estella, and we played a lot of. I was a first or second semester of college at Rutgers in 1998. I went to a show. I went to a lot of shows, and there was I went to this house called the address is 331 Somerset Street, which was a famous hardcore emo house. It was where Jeff Rickley lived from Thursday, and I'm pretty sure I was at the first Thursday show.
Oh wow.
And stuff like that. Although I would be very clear, the most important band from that world was a band called You and I. And if you've never listened to You and I, you absolutely should.
I'll check them out.
They were fucking groundbreaking, enormously important. And if you talk to anybody who's basically my age or a little younger or a little older, who's around at the time, they will tell you You and I was the most important fucking band, and so Tom from You and I was also in a band called The Assistant. A lot of other bands came out of You and I, but the two most important ones big ones were The Assistant and Hot Cross was another band. Casey was the original guitarist the other guitarist from You and I. And we're one of the guys from You and I, Justin, is still a friend of ours. My cousin Mike, who's like in the other room right now, has been my main collaborator my whole life, since we were kids. He just opened a music store in New Jersey in Red Bank, where my dad lives, called Relic Music. You should check it out. It's absolutely beautiful.
That's so sick. Yeah.
And he's just doing such an incredible job, like curating the instruments and the guitars and just making it such an awesome place. It's like an art gallery. It's fucking awesome. So psyched about it. We were hanging out there all day today. And like Justin from You and I did custom artwork for a set of pedals that he's doing and things like that. And so,
that's sick.
That band, man, the fall 99, it was at 331, the last You and I show. You can look it up on YouTube. There's footage. It was the most fucking insane, life affirming, incredible musical experience. This is like a very, very loud, I think what you would in retrospect call a screamo band or whatever. There's a lot of words that get used for that scene. I go on about this a lot. This is like my old guy spiel that weren't used at the time to describe it. they would have just been considered a hardcore band or an emo band or like that, because those two things were not really separate at that point. They weren't thought of as being different. I mean, emo was just hardcore with the distortion turned off, and a little more like, not more anguish, but the anguish just slightly placed into a different thing. But so like that, they played for 2 hours, and a 2-hour hardcore set is something to endure. And
that is insane.
Yeah,
like I got sweaty.
Hardcore bands play for like 15 minutes, dude. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah. So that show, I mean, again, I'll never forget it. We were all there, and people were getting on the mic and telling, they're like, I proposed to my wife because of this band, stuff like that. People came from Canada, from Florida, from Chicago, it was a big deal. And, so all that stuff was really, I mean, there were some fucking great bands that were around at the time, so yeah, it was, kind of a formative time, and definitely a formative scene. So that is so
sick, dude. That is awesome. That is like, do you ever listen to that podcast? Like, I'm drawing a blank. It's like the
emo history one, right?
Emo history one. Yeah, dude. What's the guy's name?
I haven't listened to it because I feel like sometimes you're like, stuff is too close to home, man. And sometimes there are lots of things that I think get described as emo that I don't actually like. Yeah, because they kind of came after the stuff that I did like.
Dude, I don't know. Like, I think that you would like dig it just because, like, I don't know. I feel like the guy does a pretty good job. I'm not from that scene. I kind of just like look back at old emo and I'm like, dude, this is so sick. And like, I really wish that like I could have been like part of that. But like, he talks about a lot of like those, like, I don't know. He has like that, like, I don't know, like kind of shitty third wave like bands on there too. You know what I'm saying? Like the stuff that's just like, that's trash. Like that's that's the dark age of emo, Yeah. But he has like a lot of like really cool stuff, like Small Brown Bike, like those people. Yeah, I don't know, just like stuff like that. It's really sick. He had like Jerome's Dream on there and stuff.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
dude, like he would probably know you and I, like what I'm saying?
Sure,
like,
I wonder if he's done it or because they're like, they were, and one of the great things about you and I and the assistant too is and this is actually something I found very interesting. So that scene was very political. Mm-hmm. Everybody was really, everybody was straight edge. Everybody
That's sick.
I mean, that's cool. So that was an extremely political scene. And so once it turned into a kind of, like the sort of depraved drinking and like, I'm so anguished, I'm going to drink myself into a stupor thing. That's when that became unrecognizable to me, because I don't think musical genres are just, patterns of sounds. They have to do with cultures and communities, and it's an anthropological category as much as anything else. And so that to me was radically different. Like you had the assistant, who was this band that came out of You and I, who was also at the Last Assistant show, which was, you can find on YouTube too, which was sick. They were incredible. But they would give like a speech before every song and be like, this is about this issue, this thing.
That's really cool.
Sexual violence or whatever, and it was weird to see, because I just thought of all that music again as being hyper political in a way, as well as about like how, like again, anguished our lives were as like suburban kids, whatever. I mean, that was the other really interesting things. I thought of that scene as being fully suburban. Like when bands came, like they played in basements in New Brunswick, or you'd go to Wilkes-Barre, PA, or Manville, New Jersey. There's an Elks Lodge there, where there was a guy named Matt, who's just blanking on his last name. He ran shows at that place for years, and that was where you came to play, was the Manville, New Jersey Elks Lodge, not like a place in New York or even some spots in Philly, but it was very, very suburban in that way. That poor guy, he was in a really bad car accident. He was paralyzed. And I think people people came out of the woodwork to support him. And I think they still do, even though he stopped doing this almost 20 years ago, still support him and stuff. And I saw, think of something. If you think of a band from that time, we saw them there. You saw Elliot or something. Or
you saw Elliot? That's sick, dude.
Yeah. And that's
awesome.
Like a bunch to,
Yeah.
I mean, the best thing to me, a huge, so this is actually related. I just bought on Bandcamp. I got a notice that the entire discography of the band Engine Kid was available for like $12, and that was a band on Revelation Records, and that was like the label, the '90s, like the Revelation stuff. That was the band for that genre or the label, sorry, that really like had defined it for me, and so the one guitarist from Engine Kid is in Sun O. So,
really? Wow.
Like, a strong relationship there. Not Stephen O'Malley, the other, I think the guy's name is Greg. I'm blanking him. I apologize. I don't want to mess people's names up. But like, we loved like, talk Texas the Reason, and
that's so sick.
Voice That's Fire a ton, and like stuff like that. And another band I loved and still love was Sensefield. That was my favorite band from that scene in that genre. So the album Killed for Less is still something I absolutely love. And it was really sad. John Bunch, the singer, he killed himself. He took his own life a couple of years ago. But my old band Estella, we played with Sensefield in New Jersey a few days after 9/11.
Whoa.
It was one of the most fucking intense experiences. And the drummer from Sensefield, I think they had lost somebody. And so they did a acoustic set, basically like unplugged.
That is so insane.
It was amazing, So I think I still have the tickets or something for it, So that was a very formative moment, for me, I think.
I know that this is on the opposite side of the country, but were you aware of what was going down in like Santa Barbara and stuff, and like San Diego at the time during those scenes?
Yeah, I like a lot of what they call San Diego hardcore stuff, and I read
Screamo as well.
Yeah,
so many.
So we just called that San Diego hardcore. So I don't know when it became this, but there's some great articles and stuff. I actually probably have bookmarked here about a lot of that. And I mean, the first reason I ever heard of Santa Barbara was because I knew bands played there.
Yeah, dude, because of Ebullition, like that label like put Santa Barbara on the map, dude, which is crazy. I had somebody on the show, like when we could have people come in studio. You might know this band. They're called Gun Outfit. They do.
Totally.
And I forget, was like, dude, I remember when I was young and like this hardcore band, I remember we like toured and we're like, let's just stop in like Goleta and see if we can find a show or something. And I'm like, that's crazy. And he was like, wow, I can't believe like Kent McClard and like all these people were like, it's just sick how it's on the map, like in that way. And so many cool bands came out of like Santa Barbara too, which I think is so crazy.
It's incredible. I'm glad that a lot of that, again, like the fact that like, again, even though I just like, oh fuck, I should buy this Engine Kid discography. I had all this shit on CD and I don't know what the hell happened to it. Like I love this stuff. Wow.
That is so cool actually. Yeah. That is,
I just say that the sort of local scene thing, these little bands from your random town somewhere, it's like great, like dig in, let's find out what the fucking Santa Barbara scene was like in 2002 or something.
It still has to be kind of unearthed again.
It does. And like there's a great page on Instagram called like Santa Barbara Babylon, who just like posts like a bunch of like old like show flyers from like Santa Barbara and stuff, and like I'll literally see show flyers and I'm like, what the hell? That is crazy.
I follow all the Jersey versions of those.
Yeah, too, exactly. My first year at UCSB, our local DIY called Bico, dude, City of Caterpillar played there for like their reunion show. And I didn't go because I didn't know who City of Caterpillar was at the time. But like thinking back, I'm like, dude, I am so dumb for not going to that. Like seeing City of Caterpillar like in a garage, that would have been so sick, We
all have those regrets, right? Like there's some show you're like, fuck, why did I do that?
I know, seriously. Another just like random fact too, Steve Aoki, like the dude, that guy was a big like emo guy in Santa Barbara. He lived in Santa Barbara for the longest time. He ran a venue called the Pickle Patch. And like
awesome.
He like lived in the co-ops that like me and Maddie lived in. He went to like Ivy again like last summer or something, for some reason was in Santa Barbara, and he was just posting all over his story like, I hosted Jimmy Eat World for one of their first shows in this kitchen, and I'm just like, that is so crazy, dude. Like
that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's so wild. I
really asked about Chicago too, and that's like another stage, but I don't know how much time do we have, because
I mean, if you want to go into it, let's do it.
We got time.
Okay, so I moved to Chicago in 2008 to go to grad school, and I've been living in Philly for a few years, and I'd kind of fallen out of the sort of, I still like, I like a lot of hardcore and stuff, but I'd gotten more interested in experimental music, and I'd always, and again, it's just because I love Jimi Hendrix playing feedback.
Yeah.
I love the Butthole Surfers. And like my favorite guitarist is actually Paul Leary from the Butthole Surfers, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
that's
you know,
sick.
who is, if you haven't watched any of their old live stuff from the 80s, like
they're the one band in Our Band Could Be Your Life I cannot get into for the life of me.
Oh man.
They are. I've got one tape of every single one of those bands. So I have Locust Technician Abortion, and it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah. Yeah. Watch the movie called Blind Eye Sees All. It's fucking nuts. It's fucking nuts. I love it. But yeah, like it's been I've been in Philly for a few years, and I'm going to I kind of discovered new music there, like sort of contemporary classical music, and then some of the free improvisation stuff. But I'd always really liked, again, just being a guitar dork. I definitely had a way into jazz and stuff like that, into experimental music. Then I went to Chicago, and I started kind of really understanding like how important jazz and free improvisation was, period, but also for a lot of the indie rock that I liked. So Tortoise and a band like that, just being totally connected to that whole world. Or even like, we talk about Joan of Arc, but like,
oh boy, yeah,
Kinsella's also like friends with and covered and loved Marvin Tate. Marvin Tate is this legendary Chicago figure who, if you should listen to, is I can't even describe his music. It's the best. But Jordan Reyes is doing a big sort of Marvin Tate discography with interviews and all this stuff. So it's
wow.
So the stuff that's kind of on the surface that you'd encounter from Chicago as like a indie rock fan or whatever has deep ties to the whole experimental music scene. So like David Grubbs and
Jim
O'Rourke.
They were Astro del Sol.
Yeah, those guys are deep, and they were introducing all those people to the art ensemble and the ACM and all that stuff. And like David is he's an incredible guy and a incredibly knowledgeable person to this day. So like, I moved to Chicago in 2008. I had a couple of friends just through Philly friends, and I just started going to shows, and I was kind of starting my life over. Like at the time I'd gone through this big breakup, and I moved to a new city. I started grad school, and I just started going to shows by myself and ended up making friends with people in different scenes there. Because the one thing about Chicago is it's really big, and there's lots of people there, and tons of people make music and lots of different kinds of music. But I would say that more so, say, than New York, it's a lot more porous. And so people who are doing the contemporary classical stuff would go to the jazz stuff, and those people go to like noise shows, and they'd all, be into, everybody loves the ACM and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So it's all kind of connected, and there are these great figures there doing awesome things, and you can just see them play all the time. There's also like, in Chicago, like there's usually a show every night of some weird genre, and there's enough of an audience to support that.
That's sick.
And that's really unique. So I just started going to stuff in 2013 or so. At that point I was like, it kind of picked up, like, because I'd done stuff in bands and I'd kind of taken a break from making music, and I was grad school, and I was like sitting at a bar reading a book, and I was like, I don't think I should be drinking too much. This is maybe not a good idea.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go play my guitar. And then I just kind of started like working on what now is the current version of my solo project, which kind of get started around then. And it took me a few years to really start playing shows. I was just going to stuff for a while, but I started playing more in like 2010, 2011. And then by like 2013, I had booked a show with, it was me and this drummer, Ryan Packard, who was amazing, I played with for a long time. And a group called ADT. It was like their first show, which was a bunch of great people. Jake Acosta, who's amazing, does Famous Laughs and is in Health and Beauty right now, and some other things. Ben Billington, some other people. And there was a scene around this place called Heaven Gallery that was next to or underneath this other place called Enemy, which, you'd have a lot of free improvisation stuff. You'd have like Cecil Spencer, and those kind of folks play there. And so like, this band Breakaway, who was from that scene, booked this show. And one of the guys who was in that band, just one of the founders of Elastic, and was like, do you want to just do a series? We need new curators. And I was like, sure. And then like that like changed my life, So from like 2013 to the present, I had a monthly series Elastic, and I kind of just became part of the organization and was, doing different things with lots of different people. And I had like a real mission to kind of make the bills as genre diverse and background diverse, and just also personally, just people from different backgrounds of race, sex, etc. And obviously, like I tried very hard to do my best with that. And of course it's never enough given the conditions we live in, it could always be better in terms of those things. But like, that was a major goal for the series. My other goal there was to try and represent people who were younger and who were maybe not up and coming, but just weren't playing shows and didn't have as many opportunities as some of the bigger people who were playing all the time. And so just kind of like highlighting folks, and things like that. So I did that for years, for like 7 or 8 years. And like, so I kind of got deeper into the Chicago scene that way and just got really, really inspired by tons of things. And like Peter Margisak, who is like a pretty legendary Chicago music critic, who's in Berlin now, he had a series at this place called Constellation where it was all new music, so contemporary classical music. So the Wandelweiser, Jörg Frey, all that stuff. That's where I learned about that music and this sort of kind of contemporary classical music that was really concerned with silence, very post-Cage, kind of timbres and textures and things like that, and just got really, really into that, started integrating all those things. So the Chicago music scene is so fucking powerful. And the fact that it's porous and that people are constantly going to each other's events, everybody collaborates. Elastic has Dave Rempis, one of the founders of Elastic, one of my favorite sax players. I mean, he's had Thursday night free improvisation and free music series there for 20 years now. And there's always an audience, there's always people, and it's always new combinations of people collaborating and stuff. And I think that's like the most fun thing. And that was also kind of just why I started drifting more towards those worlds than from like rock bands. Because you're in a band, you play with your band. And when I was in bands, that's what I did. I had my one band and I played with them. And then doing this stuff, you can like, I really think this person's cool. Let's just play a show together, or something like that. So, yeah. So that's kind of that. That's
like the whole story. That's super sick.
In a nutshell.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. That's absolutely crazy. I don't know where to start. So I guess like where did ESS come in to play with this? Is this the same as Elastic, or that's different?
They're two different organizations, but they're closely related. A lot of the same folks do stuff in both of them. ESS was founded back in the 80s, actually, by a guy called Lou Malazzi, who teaches at School of the Art Institute and other places. He's kind of he stepped down. He's kind of retired, and ESS, the employees there, turned it into more of a co-op. Elastic is also a nonprofit, but Elastic's more of a venue. We have an art gallery too. ESS is mostly a recording studio.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And it's mostly a place, but they have a very small room, and they kind of facilitate arts events around the city. So Alex Inglazian, who is the resident recording engineer there, is a dear friend and like one of the best engineers I've ever met. He'll help people do sort of art installation type stuff around the city. They did this multi-channel thing that's in the park downtown. They do stuff, so they're kind of more of a recording studio and like arts facilitator, where Elastic is kind of a venue.
Yeah.
But ESS has a Monday night series called Option that they were already streaming. So ESS had actually already been doing live streaming way before any of the other folks, and for very good reason. And this is something I think that gets lost a lot in the conversation about live streaming. They were doing it for very specifically for purposes of access for disabled audience members. Specifically, one particular disabled audience member who couldn't make it to shows anymore, who was not doing well. And they said, we have the resources to put a high quality live stream out there. So let's do that. And that's where and I had just been friends with them. I've recorded with them a bunch. Actually, one of the first piece on this new record called This Was Home, it was originally a live performance at ESS. It was back in 2015, part of another series there. So it's kind of, part of the landscape, I guess.
Do you want to talk a little bit more, I guess, just like about like the nuts and bolts of like how you guys were able to go remote at ESS too?
I can, if you'd like. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that was interesting about it was like, all right, so we're at our homes. Other people are going to be at their homes. We have to figure out how to teach people how to be their own sound engineers and record themselves and do all that stuff. So we worked really hard on that, and we collaborated with some people at an organization called Lampo, who they did a better job with spread flow sheets and flow charts and stuff. But we created a very, very simple document about what are some nice tips for miking yourself, how to set your camera angle, things like that. And some people, how to get sound into your computer and out onto the thing. And we would, especially when a thing first started, there was kind of two parts to it. We were just asking other organizations to curate. So we did some of our own events, but basically we'd have, and this was cool, right? We'd have an organization from New York or from Cleveland or from, I know Indexical, maybe you know those folks. I think they're in Santa Rosa. I know that's vaguely not your neck of the woods, but to me it's all, but and folks in LA and other places, and they'd set up the bill, and then especially at the beginning, me, Ben, Alex, other people would coach the artists, get in touch with them, talk to them about, okay, here's how you set this up. Here's how you put the stream key in, just walking people through stuff.
That's cool.
Obviously some people were very trepidatious about this. They were worried that they weren't going to be able to do it well. We had lots of technical failures. Other people really embraced it. It just kind of depended. We were just trying to be supportive. So we did a lot of like behind the scenes kind of direct support,
That's cool. I wanted to ask too, because like I had to, kind of transition to doing remote stuff as well. Like I was throwing a bunch of gigs in Santa Barbara, and like every week I was like having people come to like play like live, like on the radio and stuff too, and like where we would just like mic them up, that whole deal. But then like when COVID hit, they were just like, yeah, no more of that. And I was like, well, what am I going to do on my show? So it was kind of just like, I didn't do that stuff for a long time, and like it just didn't feel right. I was like, dude, the reason I do this is to like support like the artists and like the community around me and stuff. So I was like, in what way can I do this? And so I started trying to do like virtual gigs and everything. And yeah, it's cool that you guys like, would actually like coach the artist and like doing that stuff. Cause like, dude, there is some times where like, I feel like the artist had like no idea how to do it, and would just be like, yeah, no, I don't know how to do that.
We did a lot of like, I know a lot of people, it's like, say someone's really good at one thing, having to learn a whole new thing can suck, you might not want to do it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's totally fair. So I think Alex especially did a really good job creating like levels of difficulty for people. It's like, what do you have? Do you have your phone and some headphones? Great. That's all you need, especially if it was and again, he had all these little things like these earbuds this microphone's pretty good.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking, hook this up to your phone. You can position this better than just a phone mic, put it in front of you. And so people would do that. And like, had Ted Burns, who was somebody I played with who, in LA, just put his phone, put one of these next to it, let it rip,
Yeah.
We had other people who were doing things, going direct in and all this other stuff. But we were lucky in that, we had a great engineer and a bunch of people with time,
yeah,
to give people advice. But we were trying to share this stuff as much as we could too. It was like that kind of thing. So yeah, it's hard to teach people this stuff.
Yeah,
sometimes it just clicked.
I eventually got to the point where, I was like done doing, and it's also hard too, because you have to have like a super stable internet connection and everything, or like everybody has to have it. It eventually got like too hard to the point where like stuff was cutting out, and I was like, dude, I feel like the quality is just not really there,
Yeah.
So I started just having people like pre-record their, stuff, and it worked, dude. And it was actually, I feel like a pretty big hit locally. Like a lot of people were like tuning into like all of like the local bands and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's cool. It's actually kind of sick. Yeah.
Where were you broadcasting it?
On Twitch.
On Twitch, yeah.
Yeah, I was just doing Twitch and YouTube. And, it was just like the same format as my radio show, but I would live stream it so people could have that like aspect of it live and like chatting in like the chat room and everything.
People love the chat,
Yeah. And like,
actually the Tone Glow chat rooms.
Yeah, dude, I love the Tone Glow like ESS shows. Those were much fun.
Amazing. Those were absolutely amazing. Those and the Azra ones were some of my favorites. And Joshua with fucking rules. And I think he's taking a step back from Tone Glow for now.
Yeah.
So he's a high school chemistry teacher also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I thought he was a physics teacher.
Or physics teacher. Yeah, he's a science teacher. He's amazing. Fucking amazing.
I thought that the Cash Media ones were also really good too.
Yeah.
I know that Matt Sage was like doing those on his own for a little bit, but then eventually did like the ESS ones, and those were sick, dude.
He's also a Chicago guy. He lives now. I mean, he was originally from Colorado, I think, or one of those places. Or one of those places. I think he was from Colorado. Some of the folks that I kind of associate with Matt, like Matt and like Chaz from like Mary, they're all kind of from like Colorado, Utah, like the mountainy places. And I know Chaz is from Utah, so I don't know. I think he met Matt in Denver. It's
a wild circle. We've had like all those guys. We pretty much had like a lot of like
we're dropping
most of Fubu Sushi on like over here.
I love them all. They're all amazing.
Yeah, I love hearing their story. And like fun fact, dude, Chaz was from Ojai, which is like in Ventura County, which is like where we're at. I was just like chatting with him online. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm familiar with the area. I was from Ojai." And I was like, "What?"
I didn't know that. I thought he was from Utah.
I think maybe he lived in Ojai. Maybe not is from there, but like he lived there. And I was just like, dude, like, and I asked him like, "Do you know Rob McGill?" Because that's kind of like the guy, like Weird Cry Records, where Rob McGill, he kind of holds down like that scene over here, you know, in terms of experimental stuff. And he was like, "No, I never heard of him." And I'm just like, dude, you're like part of that scene. Like, how do you not know like the local section of it?
Chaz is also one of my absolute favorite people and musicians and guitarists and stuff. Like I got Matt Sage sold me a tape of it's Matt Sage and like Mary. It's the one called Wolf Walkers in Daylight. In like 2017, I was going through a pretty hard time and I was trying to finish my dissertation and I ended up having to live back at my parents' house for a little bit. And I just played that tape while I was writing over and over again. Like it's so good. So I love all those guys.
Patient Sounds release.
That's sick,
Patient Sounds.
Shout out Patient Sounds. I love that like little scene and everything. I think it's so cool. Like I would say that was pretty much my 2021, I would say, is just listening to like all of like Cached Media and like all those guys and like all the stuff that they did. Absolutely amazing. I have this really good memory of listening to like the most recent Fubu Sushi record on a bus in Alaska, about to go backpacking through Denali, and like it's like super foggy and it was so sick, cool. Dude. And I'm just like, dude, looking at like some stuff that I'm like, wow, dude, this is like nothing I've ever seen before. And I just have like them playing in the background. It's so good.
I got that, the box set. You know?
Yep.
Oh, you got the box set? Nice. I'm honestly,
I waited for the box set.
That's sick.
Actually, man, Chaz and I, he came to Chicago. We've been friends on the internet and fans of each other for a long time. He came to Chicago over the summer while I was there, and we did a recording session, and it's still on my computer. I haven't had time to edit it yet. So I'm I'm building a new computer over winter break. That's like my big goal. So once that's set, I'm going to dig into that session and we might do more stuff. We might do it remotely or whatever, but we got to hang out. He played the record release show. He came up from Columbia, Missouri to play the record release show for Earthwork a few weeks ago in Chicago. So that was fantastic. And that was a fucking great night. So
that's amazing.
Love that guy. He's a goat farmer, you know.
Wait, Chaz is?
Yeah.
He's a farmer? A goat farmer?
He herds goats.
What? That is
he also climbs trees for some reason. Yeah, he's great.
Local legend.
We gotta get him on. We gotta get him on the show, Maddie. He's like reached out to me a couple times, and like the cards just haven't played out. I asked him to be on the show one time, but he was going on like a long backpacking trip somewhere in Colorado, so it didn't work out. So we're gonna have to do it again soon. But that's gonna be an interesting interview. I really want to talk to him about his goat herding, dude. Like
we're getting hikers, we're getting professors next year.
I know. Seriously.
We're getting Sarah.
Yeah. Who else have we had? That's
which Sarah?
Sarah Hines or
Sarah Hines. Sarah
Hines. Thank you.
They're also a very, very dear friend and somebody I admire the fuck out of. So
would love to just talk to her about that syllabus.
I know. Yeah. And Sarah, it was interesting because I was talking to somebody recently, not to make this about me or anything, but I realized that like a big influence that I've had like for me over the last bunch of years has actually been like percussionists in even though like I play guitar. And Sarah is like up there. Like I know that Sarah's more doing composer work now, but I know Sarah as as a drummer, basically initially as a percussionist, and like her work and some of the folks that she's worked with, like Tim Feeney, who I think is in LA or San Diego now, and Greg Stewart, and then other people like unrelated, but like Frank Rosalie and stuff like those people. I kind of realized I was like, oh, all this guitar stuff I think that's where the influence is coming from right now.
Yeah.
These impressionists and things. So,
That's sick.
Yeah, Sarah rules.
Yeah, Sarah's cool. We need to get Sarah on the show too. Yeah, who else have we had that's a professor? I think Matt Sage is a professor too.
Oh yeah, he teaches at School of the Art Institute also. I used to teach there too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's that's right.
You can just say that Patrick and Dental are professors in their own rights, but they're not professors.
Yeah.
I think it's just you two.
Yeah, right.
Who's the other person? Oh, Matt. Yeah.
Yeah.
We said Patrick and who else? Patrick Shiroishi?
Yeah.
And then Jimmy Tamburino.
Tamburello, yeah.
He's not a professor. That's just Mr. Dental.
Yeah. Anyways.
Professor. Well, Drew Daniel, we should talk to Drew.
Oh my God.
Professor. And
that's too scary.
Drew's the best. He's so great. David Grubbs is a professor too.
Really?
Oh, yes,
That's
he is. He's a professor of poetry. I would love to honestly talk to him about some of those Bastard lyrics because that shit is some of the best written
he's so
music
great
ever. Man. The vocab right there, and I come from a long line of shipbuilders, is just mind-boggling.
So good.
That's sick. Go ahead, Maddie.
I was going to say, should we talk about your tape?
Yeah, I was going to say we should hop into some music. Yeah.
Instead of talking about this new release.
Oh, okay.
Which we're just going to assume it's great. It's fantastic. I love the piece that took like 5 years to come together. But last Flight of the Void Ship.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's really one of my favorite tapes I got.
I'm so glad you like it.
Kudos to Jordan, who wrote that Bandcamp piece, and I bought that on a whim. I'm shocked this hasn't sold out yet. I really hope people just get it.
I have more of them, so if people want. But I did sell a lot of those tapes thanks to that Bandcamp thing, and that was really nice.
I suppose really I want to get into kind of just a bit of the weeds here. Like these pieces, they came together over the course of several years. You were doing them kind of asynchronously there. You'd make one and then...
Well, so that tape is a reissue of two other tapes that came out back in both, I think in 2013, 2014. Mm-hmm. And I kind of initially intended them to be together, but actually no, those pieces were each of them was recorded in like one session.
Okay.
The new stuff is stuff that took me a long time that I was working on over time, but those pieces like the first track, the Fire in the Lacquer House, that was something that actually just I had an idea for that sort of technique basically of a way of doing something. And I asked my friend, a guy named Jonathan Lang, who's a philosophy professor and great musician in Addison, he works in a psych lab now, but I actually met Jonathan because he was playing with Julian Lynch years ago. And
my God. I love Mayor. Mayor's a phenomenal tape.
I know. Julian's great guy, good friend, like very dear friend, So, it was like weird. I went to see Julian in like, God, I don't know, 2012, Chicago, something like that. And Jonathan was band. We just kind of hit it off. We all, anyway, I was just like, can you send me a chord progression? So we did. And then I made that piece and I recorded that. And then the first piece and the last piece were a different tape. They were just called Fire in the Lacquer House. And then the last flight was this other tape that I had done with a tape label called Solid Melts initially, the guy named Drew Gibson from Baby Birds Don't Drink Milk and a few other things. And so I kind of wanted them all to be together. And so like 2 years ago, I was like, I have this other record I'm finishing, but these pieces are very important to me. I want to put them together as one story,
Yeah.
And so they're all a lot of techniques and stuff that I think kind of all go together in a certain time. Yeah. And that artwork is done by my friend Eric Hans, who is a GIS.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's sick.
Person. He's amazing. He lives in Detroit now and used to work for City of Chicago doing stuff with bike lanes and bump outs and lights and stuff. So
yeah.
Brilliant person. Sorry, I don't if you had. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's perfect. It's just really technique wise with this and kind of the vague story it tells, because you've left so much of this either to just kind of PR little pieces or just like the quote that's inside the liner notes or just the title track. When you were making your pieces, though, conceptually, like, does it really start with just a chord? Does it start kind of with a vision you have? Do you know, like, are there characters or kind of motifs or things that you want? No, this is great. Like, it kind of depends, right? So for a lot of those, it'd be like there'd be a phrase, for example. So in the actual, there's a rising and descending melody in one of the tracks, and I just wanted to do something with that and work through it. Another one involved really just wanting to do
things with particular pieces of equipment. So one of my favorites on there is the Wyche Heart of Hearts. That was all made with this thing called a noise swash. It was a guitar pedal. Every sound on there is made with that guitar pedal. That pedal was made by 4MS, who no longer makes guitar pedals. They make modular stuff now almost exclusively, but they started out making pedals, and it just was a really interesting, weird set of oscillators and feedback loops and stuff. So I was like, I'm going to do a whole composition with this. And so it's that thing with effects, obviously other effects, but that's the only sound source. And so there'd be something like, okay, I want to do something with this. I want to do something with this melody, or I want to do something with this technique where I use this chord progression or something like that. Or there's some bowed stuff, or I was like, I want to center the bowing in some way. So there's those technical things I kind of want to explore. But I also, I mentioned before, I have a sleep disorder, I have sleep apnea. And before it got sort of diagnosed, and I use a CPAP machine, which is a whole other story.
But my dad has
I have very vivid dreams. Extremely fucking vivid dreams, and I remember them. And so they're very narrative. I love science fiction. I had a dream about a fleet of void ships, and I took that and started kind of rolling it into a story, vague story, one that people could fill in themselves and think about in other way, on their own and stuff. And I put that together into these pieces to tell this suggestion of a story because I don't want to over determine what a listener hears. I want people to be able to do interpretive work and have imaginative things happening and not be told what to think. That's why I don't like, so what's this about? I'm like, I don't know. What is it about to you? What do you think it's about? You tell me, like, I'd love to, but that's kind of where that stuff comes from, if that helps.
Yes.
That's cool.
Seriously. It was always, to me, it just felt like a black box recording. Maybe that's cool. The most like minuscule way I want to say it. This is
all right. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
So, I know you said you have to go in a bit here. Do you have time to take a couple fan questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Before we head out.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Okay, so the first one, how did you find out that you shredded so hard? Your work feels more like a journal than albums. How close to your heart are your releases? I think that's from Chaz.
I know it's from Chaz. Yeah. I don't think I shred so hard. Not compared to Chaz, Jessica Ackerley, pick somebody, Wendy Eisenberg, Sandy Ewan, Nick Milvoy, all these people who are my friends and people I have unbelievable admiration for, and I do not shred hard compared to any of them. So let's just be clear on that. But yeah, everything is really personal. Like, I don't know how else for it to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what else it could be, even when it's kind of conceptual or based on a technique or something like that. Like, it's so like techniques are physical things, right? So the idea that it being something with like, I want to do this one thing with this piece of equipment, and somehow that's somehow less personal than a concept or an idea or a memory is really weird, because it's the most tactile, physical point of contact with the sound, right? Is in the techniques and then the equipment and things like that. And so I think that's profoundly personal, because it's where your body meets the, sounds and things like that.
Yeah.
And again, the three main, I think I've basically in this sort of part of my life, three main releases, which is that one that you have right there, the Void Chip tape, this new one, Earthwork, and then the one in what I think of as actually being in the middle, which is called Our Severed Sleep, which is also about the kind of wrestling with some changes in my life, but also this issue with not being able to sleep and getting a diagnosis and things like that. And these things are, they can't but be these touchstones for, thinking about yourself and things like that. So I don't know if what was the other parts of the question? They are personal in that way. They are journals, right? They're
exactly.
I think on each level, I think conceptually, emotionally, and sort of technically and physically, I hope on these important themes, these kind of things that like push themselves to the center of my experience, I guess.
You come from an emo band background, so it makes sense.
Right.
No, that's cool. That pretty much answered the question. So this next one says, how does Dan balance being a literary genius / musical genius and amazing friend?
Well, who had that? It's so nice. That's so fucking nice.
Yeah, let me see. DJ Brylan D Jazz.
Oh, Jabril and Jazz. Yeah. That's my friend Gabriel from Van Landingham. Dunn is a brilliant listener and thinker and person. Is an old friend from Philly. And he's actually also working now with Astral Spirits too.
Oh, wow. That's
consultant. And he'll be starting his own imprint soon, which everybody should look out for, which is going to be called Creative Outlets and Works. It's going to be fucking awesome.
That's sick.
And it's going to definitely, I won't try to represent it because it's be awesome. Well, I can't. So to answer the question, any way that I'm a good friend, I owe to my family, and especially my grandparents, who I think anybody who, in our world here would, kind of valued hospitality, I think, above all. And I think as a curator and a musician, I try to have a spirit of hospitality, and I try to welcome people in as best I can. And I don't always succeed. Sometimes I fail terribly, but I try really hard to live up to this model that I grew up with of people who took care of just about everyone they ever met. So there's that. I also don't sleep. So I have lots of time. But I do feel really I don't know, man, just motivated. I don't know. I feel like personally, I believe this is our one and only life. And I want to do creative things with it. And I want to do things that are creative musically, because that feels like a really important way to be a person. And also, with academics and stuff and just trying to think and write and things like that, it also feels like a really rewarding creative process. That's another good way to be a person. So I don't know, the fact that I have a lot of time on my hands because I'm always awake, and also I'm just motivated to, I think, live in a way that's based on creativity, and that really centers that. It just motivates me to do all this stuff. And maybe sometimes it's too much, but trying.
That's awesome. I love how you're actually able to articulate that answer. I feel like most people will just be like, I don't know, man.
So my father always says we're all going to die one day. So
yeah, that's awesome. So this next one says, how does it feel to have Earthwork out, and what do you think you'll follow it up with?
It feels really, really satisfying. I recorded the title track, like I said, in 2015. Earthwork itself, that title piece, sorry, that one. So the first track, This Was Home, was recorded back in 2015. But Earthwork itself was recorded over 3 or 4 years of mixing, and it took forever. And it's, I think, the best thing I've ever done personally. That's what I think. And disagree. It's the most intimate thing, I think, and I think a lot of this stuff is very intimate. So it's so simple and so complicated in a way, and it took me so long to get every single one of those sounds is very delicately placed and cared for, and I'm actually really happy it's over because there were moments where I actually had to take the whole thing apart again to reassemble it with all of the spatialization, with the mixing, with the mastering. I had to do a lot of work with this mixed by Brian Sulpizio, who is also one of the other best engineers I've ever met. His project is called Health and Beauty, probably the best rock band in Chicago easily. So listen to Health and Beauty, and mastered by Alex Inglesian at ESS. So having both of these amazing engineers help with this. It was also partially, most of it was recorded in a silo at a residency in Wisconsin called Acre. And Tony Patera, who is the kind of resident main music person there, who's also in the band Zombie, helped record parts of it. So it's a very intimate process that took a long time. And I had 3-4 hours of material initially that I arranged into these 12-14 minutes or something like that. It was a very laborious, it was very laborious.
How did you know that it was done? I feel if you're working on something for 3 to 4 years, do you eventually, you're just okay, I'm done.
I just felt done. I just knew it was done.
Okay.
I don't know, when I and there was a few moments, I think, in the mixing process with Brian where we were especially working on there's a loud percussive sound, like a big thump. That's actually just the sound of my guitar case closing inside the silo. Oh, wow.
That's sick. Yeah.
That's how reverberant the silo was. And in real life, it felt like you were punched in the chest. And so when we placed the very last one, there's a, and then a, and I was okay, this is done now. That last, I was okay, now we know when it's over.
Yeah.
So I actually am working on a new record already, and I've been working on it kind of conceptually for a while. One of the pieces will be close to some themes from a song I wrote a really long time ago, similar to the whale elephant situation. Actually, I had this demo in 2004 and 3 songs on it. The whale elephant, the last song on this one, is a new version of the first song on that demo, which is not available anywhere. And the last song on that demo was a piece called the Pluralistic Universe that I had written with my band, with my best friends who are, again, in this other room right here, my cousins. And there are a few themes and motifs from that piece that I've been kind of wanting to rework too. So I'd like to do that. And that piece is going to be called Inhabit the Sky. And I have another piece that I'm working on that's much more chords, just like guitar chords, like this.
Some more.
Yeah. So more like, for a long time. So I am working on that stuff. I don't know when it'll be done though, but I'm trying to, And then I have, there also is I have a trio with Mark Shippey and Ben Billington.
Oh, nice.
We did a 3rd recording session for that trio over the summer as well. Spirits. And I don't know who's going to put it out, but there's like 3 hours of stuff. So that is another thing that's going to be for the new computer when it gets built. So
that's sick.
Those are the things I'm working on for that. Yeah. And then I'm trying to do this thing with Chads, and I've been meaning to try and do something with Jessica Ackerley forever. And like, there's a lot to do, but as far as solo stuff goes, I have a plan for a new record.
That's amazing. We love to hear it, and we can't wait to see what the future brings. We have one more fan question, and this one says, what's your favorite order at Wendy's? This is from a good friend of TBD named Patrick Shirishi.
Oh man, Patrick, I have to confess, I never go to Wendy's. I don't actually think I've ever been to a Wendy's in my life.
Huge.
That's
so
huge.
I have no idea what my favorite order is. Do they have like a good milkshake there?
Yeah, the Frosty. That's what they're known for.
Yeah, the Frosty.
Then it's going to be the Frosty. Yeah, it's a Frosty.
And you...
Can I ask you guys something? Just about that. Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, so I don't really have an answer. No, I'm just kidding.
What's your favorite fast food place then?
Man, I don't eat a lot of fast food.
Yeah.
But since I live in the Midwest now, we do go to Culver's sometimes.
Nice.
Which has excellent milkshakes and stuff. So, but I'm from New Jersey. We go to diners.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Totally different culture right there. That just makes me think of the movie Diner. Crap. There we go.
Anyways, so that does it for our fan question stuff. We're wrapping up here. Where can people keep up with everything, Daniel Wyche?
Just Bandcamp, Daniel Wyche, bandcamp.com, or at American Dreams Records. I think that's the best place to look, is through American Dreams. So,
nice.
All right.
And so one last question before we go. It's kind of the biggest one of the show. Are you ready for it?
Okay.
So, Maddie, do you want me to say it?
I'll go for it.
Do it.
You finally do make it to Wendy's, though, fingers crossed over here, and you order yourself a Frosty, and there's a rat inside it, and it's going to jump in your mouth, head or butt, and why?
Well, because the rat would more likely survive if it jumped in my mouth butt first than head first. Is that the question?
Yeah.
And so I would want the rat to survive.
That's
nice.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's really nice, actually.
My soon-to-be wife loves animals, and she would want to rescue the rat and take it home and make it our pet. So
it's a white rat also. That's just, no drugs, nothing bad's been done to it. It's a good fella.
Lab rat. That's why. Wendy's worker brought it. It was like, bring your pet to work day, and it escaped. So it's a good rat.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to bite the rat's head off so that it dies.
So you're never an Ozzy fan?
I do love Black Sabbath.
Yeah, Black Sabbath is classic. You can't go wrong. So anyways, that's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 every Sunday 4 to 6 p.m. and NetNet Radio every Saturday 4 p.m. This is Daniel Wyche. Thanks for being on the show, Daniel.
Thanks. Thank you both for having me. It's great talking to you.